She returned a lost wallet to its owner, refusing the reward because it was the right thing to do. What she didn't know, the man standing before her was a ruthless mafia boss. And her simple act of honesty had just changed both their lives forever. The morning rush at Miller's cafe had finally died down, leaving Rachel with a mess of empty coffee cups and crumpled napkins scattered across mismatched tables. She wiped down the counter with mechanical efficiency, her mind already calculating whether today's earnings would cover both the electric bill and her son's field trip money. It couldn't cover both. It never did.
Mom.
I can't find my science project. Rachel glanced at the back room where 8-year-old Danny was supposed to be doing homework. Check under the booth, honey. You were working there yesterday. She reached for another table and froze. A black leather wallet sat wedged between the salt shaker and the napkin holder. Expensive leather. The kind that didn't belong in her neighborhood. Rachel picked it up, hoping to find a business card or phone number inside. What she found instead made her stomach drop.
Cash.
Thick bundles of $100 bills. More money than she'd seen in years. Her fingers trembled slightly as she counted. Had to be at least $10,000. Beneath the cash, she found an ID card with a photo of a man in his mid-30s. Sharp jawline, dark eyes that seemed to look through the camera rather than at it.
Luca Romano.
The address listed was in the financial district, the part of the city where Rachel only went when she had to beg the bank for more time on her loan payments. Danny, grab your backpack. We're closing early.
But Mom.
Now, baby. 20 minutes later, Rachel stood in front of Romano Tower, a gleaming monstrosity of glass and steel that seemed to pierce the clouds. Her rust-spotted Honda looked criminally out of place in the circular driveway where valets managed Mercedes and Teslas. A security guard stepped forward as she approached the entrance, his hand moving subtly toward his hip. "Can I help you? I'm here to see Luca Romano. I have something of his." The guard's expression shifted from bored to alert. "Mr. Romano doesn't take walk-ins. Tell him Rachel Miller found his wallet at Miller's Cafe on 5th Street. She held it up, and the guard's eyes widened slightly at the sight of the expensive leather. He spoke into his earpiece, listened, then looked at her with something between surprise and suspicion. 32nd floor.
They're expecting you.
The elevator ride felt eternal. Danny pressed his face against the glass wall, watching the city shrink beneath them. "Mom, why are we so high up? Is this man rich?" "I think so, baby." "Are we going to be rich too?" Rachel's heart clenched. "We're going to be honest. That's better." The elevator doors opened directly into a reception area that screamed wealth, marble floors, abstract art that probably cost more than her cafe, and a receptionist whose suit likely matched Rachel's monthly rent. "Ms. Miller? This way, please." She followed the woman down a hallway lined with floor-to-ceiling windows. The city sprawled below like a toy model, and Rachel suddenly felt very small, very out of place, and very aware of the coffee stain on her shirt sleeve. The receptionist opened a door to an office that was less a room and more a statement. Behind a massive desk sat the man from the ID photo, though the picture hadn't captured the intensity of his presence. Luca Romano looked up from a stack of papers, and Rachel felt the weight of his gaze like a physical thing. "Ms. Miller," his voice was smooth, controlled. Not warm, but not cold either. Carefully neutral. "Apparently, you have something that belongs to me." Rachel stepped forward and placed the wallet on his desk. "You left it at my cafe this morning. I wanted to return it." Luca picked up the wallet, checking its contents with practiced efficiency. Something flickered across his face. Surprise, maybe, or suspicion. "Everything's here." "Of course it is." He studied her for a long moment, and Rachel forced herself not to look away. She'd learned years ago that looking away meant weakness, and weak people got stepped on. "Most people would have kept the cash," Luca said finally. "Called it a finder's fee. I'm not most people. And it's not my money." Refreshingly honest, he opened a drawer and pulled out a stack of bills, counting out what looked like $2,000. "For your trouble." Rachel's hand twitched. God, she needed that money. The cafe was hemorrhaging cash. Danny needed new shoes, and her landlord had already called twice this month. But something in Luca Romano's expression told her that taking it would change something fundamental about this interaction. "I didn't return it for a reward," she said quietly. "I returned it because it was the right thing to do." Luca's eyebrows rose slightly. "The right thing?"
Yeah.
"Novel concept, I know." She took Danny's hand. "Come on, baby. We need to get you to school." "Wait." Rachel turned back. Luca was standing now, and she realized he was taller than she'd thought. He moved around the desk with the fluid grace of someone completely comfortable in his own skin, someone used to commanding rooms and people. "What's your cafe called?" "Miller's. On 5th Street. Like I told your security guard." "I'll remember that." He extended his hand. "Thank you, Ms. Miller. It's been educational." His handshake was firm, warm, and over before Rachel could analyze it. She nodded and left, very aware that something had just happened, something she didn't fully understand. In the elevator, Danny tugged her sleeve. "Mom, why didn't you take the money?" "We need money." Rachel knelt down to his level. "Because, baby, some things are more important than money. Like being able to look at yourself in the mirror." "I don't get it." "You will someday." As they drove away from Romano Tower, Rachel glanced in her rearview mirror at the gleaming building. She didn't know that Luca Romano was still standing at his window, watching her battered Honda disappear into traffic. She didn't know that he'd already made a phone call, his voice quiet and thoughtful. Find out everything about Rachel Miller. Everything. And she definitely didn't know that her simple act of honesty had just set off a chain of events that would change both their lives forever. Luca Romano stood at his penthouse window, a glass of 50-year-old scotch untouched in his hand. Below, the city glittered like scattered diamonds, each light representing someone's life, someone's struggle, someone's secret. He'd built his empire on understanding those secrets, exploiting them when necessary, burying them when convenient. But Rachel Miller had no secrets. That's what bothered him. His phone buzzed. "Talk to me, Vincent." His lieutenant's voice crackled through. "Got the report on the cafe owner. And
She's clean, boss.
I mean spotless. Rachel and Miller, 32 years old. Widowed 3 years ago. Husband died in a construction accident. No life insurance, he wasn't union. She took out a loan to buy the cafe, been struggling to keep it afloat ever since. Works 6 days a week, sometimes 7. One kid, Danny, 8 years old. Straight-A student at Jefferson Elementary." Luca took a sip of his scotch.
Debts.
40 grand on the cafe loan. Behind on payments. Another 5 in credit cards. Medical bills from when the kid had pneumonia last winter. She's drowning, boss, but she's doing it quietly. No implants, no shortcuts. Criminal record? Parking tickets. That's it. Not even a speeding violation. Family? Parents died in a car crash when she was 19.
No siblings.
No support system except a neighbor who watches the kid sometimes. Vincent paused. "Boss, why are we looking into a cafe owner? She do something?" Lucas set down his glass. "She did the one thing nobody in this city does anymore, Vincent. She gave something back without asking for anything in return." Silence on the other end. "Then, you want me to keep tabs on her?"
Discrète surveillance.
"I want to know if she's in trouble." "You got it, boss." Luca ended the call and returned to the window. Rachel Miller was an anomaly, a glitch in the system he'd learned to navigate. In his world, everyone had an angle. Everyone wanted something. Power, money, protection, revenge. The currency varied, but the transaction was always the same. But she'd walked away from $2,000. Money that would have solved at least some of her problems. Money that most people in her situation would have grabbed, without hesitation. "I didn't return it for reward. I returned it because it was the right thing to do." Her words echoed in his mind. When was the last time someone had talked to him about doing the right thing? His mother, maybe, before cancer took her when he was 17. Before his father's gambling debts forced Luca into the family business. Before right and wrong became luxuries he couldn't afford. He'd killed his first man at 19. Not directly. He'd given the order, and someone else had pulled the trigger.
But the weight of it was the same.
That man had stolen from the Romano family, and in their world, theft demanded blood. Luca had thrown up afterward, alone in a bathroom where no one could see. His father had clapped him on the shoulder the next day. "You're a man now, son." A real Romano. 15 years later, Luca had lost count of the orders he'd given, the lives he'd ruined, the blood on his hands. He'd convinced himself it was necessary, that this was simply how the world worked. You took what you could, protected what was yours, and destroyed anyone who threatened your empire. Then a single mother with coffee-stained sleeves had walked into his office and reminded him that other worlds existed. Worlds where people still believed in doing the right thing, even when it hurt. His phone buzzed again. This time it was Marco, his underboss. "Boss, we got a problem with a Castellano shipment." "What kind of problem?" "They're shortchanging us. 30% light on the agreed weight. Set up a meeting. Tomorrow night, the usual place." "You want me to bring the full crew?" Luca paused, his reflection staring back at him from the darkened window. A week ago, he would have said yes. Would have made an example of the Castellanos, reminded everyone in the 5 boroughs that you didn't cheat the Romano family.
No.
Just you and Vincent. We'll talk first.
Talk.
Marco's surprise was evident. "Boss, they disrespected us. If we don't respond." "We'll talk first," Luca repeated, his voice hardening. "That's the order." He ended the call before Marco could argue further. His men would question this decision. Some would see it as weakness. In his world, weakness was fatal. But something had shifted when Rachel Miller walked out of his office. She looked at him like he was just a man, not a monster. Like doing the right thing was still possible, even for someone like him. Luca returned to his desk and pulled open a drawer. Rachel's refused reward sat inside, $2,000 in crisp bills. He'd put it there after she left, unable to quite process what had happened. An honest woman in this city, he murmured to himself. Maybe the only one left. His computer screen showed the surveillance feed Vincent had already set up. Rachel's Cafe, a modest storefront wedged between a laundromat and a phone repair shop. Through the window, he could see her wiping down tables, that same mechanical efficiency from this morning. She looked tired. She looked like she was carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. She looked real. And for the first time in 15 years, Luca Romano wondered if he remembered how to be real too. He picked up his phone one more time. "Vincent, what time does Miller's Cafe open?" 7 a.m., boss. "Clear my morning schedule. I'm going out." "Where to?" Luca smiled slightly. "To get a cup of coffee." Rachel had just flipped the cafe sign to open when she noticed the man standing outside. He wore jeans and a dark Henley instead of the expensive suit from yesterday, but there was no mistaking those eyes. Luca Romano studied her cafe like he was memorizing every detail: the chipped paint on the window frame, the faded awning, the crooked Miller's sign that she kept meaning to fix. Her heart did an uncomfortable flip. Men like him didn't come to neighborhoods like this without a reason, and reasons usually meant trouble. The bell chimed as he entered. "Good morning, Ms. Miller." "Mr. Romano." Rachel wiped her hands on her apron, forcing her voice to stay steady. "This is a surprise. I was in the area. Thought I'd try your coffee." He slid onto a stool at the counter, moving with that same fluid grace from yesterday. Without the suit and the office, he looked younger, more human. It made him somehow more intimidating. "Just coffee. Black."
No sugar.
"Of course." Rachel poured from the fresh pot, hyper-aware of her hands, of the ancient coffee maker that wheezed and sputtered, of the cracked tile behind the counter that she'd been meaning to replace for 6 months. Everything about her cafe suddenly felt shabby, exposed under his quiet scrutiny. She set the cup in front of him. $2.50. Luca wrapped his hands around the mug, and Rachel noticed his knuckles, scarred, like he'd spent years hitting things. Or people. He took a sip, and something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe. "This is good. Don't sound so shocked." a hint of a smile. I've had a lot of bad coffee. Well, coffee's the one thing I don't cut corners on. Rachel grabbed a cloth and started wiping down the already clean counter, needing something to do with her hands. Even when I probably should. The morning quiet settled between them, broken only by the hiss of the coffee maker and distant traffic. Rachel could feel him watching her, not threatening, exactly, but intense. Like he was trying to solve a puzzle she didn't know she represented. The bell chimed again. Mrs. Chen shuffled in, her usual Tuesday morning routine. Rachel, dear. My regular, please. Coming right up, Mrs. Chen. Rachel moved into the familiar rhythm of work, coffee with cream and 2 sugars, a blueberry muffin warmed for exactly 20 seconds. Mrs. Chen settled at her favorite table by the window, pulling out her crossword puzzle. You know all your customers, Luca observed. It's a small place. You get to know people. Rachel rang up the order, then started prepping for the breakfast rush that would begin in about 20 minutes. Mrs. Chen's been coming here since before I owned it. Her husband too before he passed. She does the Tuesday crossword here, because it was their thing together. That's... Luca paused, seeming to search for the word. Nice. It's life, Mr. Romano. Small, ordinary life. Rachel cracked eggs into a bowl, whisking them with practiced efficiency. The kind where people matter more than profit margins. Is that a dig at me? I don't know you well enough to dig at you, she glanced at him.
Doi.
Their eyes met, and Rachel felt something electric pass between them. A recognition, maybe. Or a warning. No, Luca said quietly. You don't know me at all. More customers trickled in. Mr. Patterson with his newspaper. The Rodriguez twins grabbing coffee before their construction shift. Young Sarah from the bookstore next door. Rachel greeted each one by name, took orders without needing to write them down, asked about kids and jobs and lives. Luca watched it all, with that same intense focus. He'd barely touched his coffee, she realized. He was here for something else, though she couldn't figure out what. Finally, the morning rush ebbed. Rachel refilled his cup, without asking. You didn't have to do that. Coffee's cheap. Especially for paying customers. She leaned against the counter, studying him properly now. Why are you really here, Mr. Romano?
Luca.
Okay. Luca, the name felt strange on her tongue. Too intimate. Why are you really here? He was quiet for a long moment, his fingers tracing the rim of his cup. Yesterday you said something interesting. That you returned my wallet because it was the right thing to do. It was. When's the last time someone did the right thing for you? The question caught her off guard. Rachel opened her mouth, closed it. Images flashed through her mind. Danny's father's funeral. The loan officer who'd taken a chance on her, Mrs. Chun who always left an extra dollar tip she couldn't afford. People do good things every day, she said finally. You just have to look for them. I haven't seen much good. Not in my world. Then maybe you're looking in the wrong places. Luca laughed, a short, sharp sound without much humor. You have no idea what kind of places I look. You're right. I don't. Rachel crossed her arms. And I'm guessing I don't want to know. Probably not. The silence that followed felt heavier than before. Rachel should have been intimidated. This man clearly operated in circles she couldn't imagine, wielded power she couldn't comprehend. But something in his eyes looked almost
lost.
Like he'd wandered so far into darkness that he'd forgotten what light looked like. Look, she said gently. I'm glad you like the coffee. But if you came here looking for some kind of absolution or inspiration or whatever, I'm just a woman trying to keep her cafe open and her kid fed. I'm not a saint. I'm not special. I'm just real, Luca finished. You're real. Before Rachel could respond, he stood and pulled out his wallet. He placed a $50 bill on the counter. That's too much. Consider it a tip. For the coffee. And the conversation. He walked toward the door, then paused. Your son.
Danny.
He's a good kid? Rachel's protective instincts flared. How do you know my son's name? You mentioned him yesterday. Luca's expression was unreadable. He's lucky to have a mother like you. Then he was gone, the bell chiming his exit. Rachel stared at the $50 bill, her heart pounding.
She should have been relieved.
Instead, she felt something close to dread. Because men like Luca Romano didn't visit small cafes without reason. And whatever his reason was, Rachel suspected her quiet, ordinary life had just become a lot more complicated. The warehouse on the docks smelled like salt, rust, and old blood. Luca stood in the center of the cavernous space, hands in his pockets, watching two of his enforcers drag a man named Tony Castellano to his knees. Tony's face was already swelling, one eye nearly shut. "Boss," Vincent said quietly beside him. He skimmed 30 grand from the shipment. Split it with his cousin. We got the cousin in the car outside. Marco cracked his knuckles, eager. "Want me to make an example?" "Send the bodies to his uncle as a message." Luca looked at Tony, who was crying now, begging. The old Luca, the one from last week, would have nodded. Would have let Marco do what Marco did best. Would have reminded everyone in the 5 boroughs that stealing from the Romano family meant death. But he kept hearing Rachel's voice. "People do good things every day. You just have to look for them." "How old are you, Tony?" Luca asked. Tony blinked through his tears. "T23, Mr. Romano." "You got family? Besides your idiot cousin?" "A sister. She's got MS. Can't work." "I was just the medical bills are killing us and I thought." "You thought stealing from me was smarter than asking for help."
I'm sorry.
"Please, Mr. Romano."
Please.
"I'll pay it back. Every cent. Just don't." Luca held up a hand. The warehouse went silent. Even the distant sound of water lapping against the docks seemed to hold its breath. "Here's what's going to happen," Luca said, his voice carrying through the space. "You're going to pay back what you stole. 50% of your cut every week until the debt's clear. You're also going to give me the name of the clinic treating your sister." Tony's face twisted in confusion. "What? The clinic? Where is it?" "St. Mary's. On Lexington." "But I don't." "I'll make sure her bills are covered. Consider it a loan. You'll pay that back too, but interest-free. Take you about 3 years if you're smart with money." Luca stepped closer. "But if you ever steal from me again, Tony, I won't be this generous. Understand?" Tony nodded frantically, unable to speak. "Get him out of here," Luca told Vincent. "And get his sister's account information. I want those medical bills handled by tomorrow." Marco stepped forward after Tony was dragged away, his face a mask of disbelief. "Boss, what the hell is that?" "That was business. That was soft." Marco's voice rose. 3 years? You should've. "I should've what, Marco?" Luca's tone dropped to something dangerous. Killed a 23-year-old kid because he was desperate? Put a bullet in him because he loves his sister?
Yes.
That's how this works. That's how it's always worked. You show mercy and everyone thinks they can steal from us. Or, Luca said quietly, they learn that loyalty is earned, not beaten into people. Marco stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "You've changed. Ever since that cafe woman." "Careful, Marco." The warning in Luca's voice was clear. Marco backed down, but the damage was done. The seed was planted. Vincent waited until Marco stormed off before speaking.
"He's not wrong, boss."
"The men are talking. They're saying you've gone soft. Let them talk." Luca, Vincent rarely used his first name. When he did, it meant something serious. This world doesn't forgive weakness. You know that better than anyone. Your own father. "My father died in a pool of his own blood because he thought violence solved everything." Luca's jaw tightened. "I watched the Moretti family put 3 bullets in him over a perceived insult. Over words, Vincent. Is that the legacy I want? It's the legacy you inherited. Then maybe it's time to write a new one?" Vincent studied him for a long moment. "This woman, Rachel, she really got to you, didn't she?" Luca thought about the cafe that morning. The way Rachel had moved through her small world with purpose and grace. The way she knew every customer's name, their stories, their struggles. The way she'd looked at him, not with fear or calculation, but with honest curiosity. She reminded me that other ways of living exist, Luca said finally. Ways that don't involve warehouses and blood and bodies. You can't just walk away from this life. You know that. I'm not walking away. I'm changing the rules. The other families won't accept that. Then they'll have to adjust. That evening, Luca called a meeting with his capos, the 5 men who ran his operations across the city. They gathered in his office, confusion evident on their faces. Emergency meetings usually meant war or expansion. This felt like neither. Gentlemen, Luca began, standing at the window overlooking the city. We're making some changes to how we operate. What kind of changes? Asked Sal Benedetti, his oldest capo. We're reducing our footprint in certain volatile enterprises. I want a full audit of our loan sharking operations. Anyone we've been bleeding dry, I want realistic payment plans drawn up. Anyone who can't pay, we write it off. Stunned silence. Boss, Sal said carefully. That's millions of dollars. It's pocket change compared to our legitimate holdings. Which brings me to point 2. I want our legal operations expanded. Construction, shipping, real estate. We're going to shift focus. You're talking about going straight? Marco laughed bitterly from his corner. We're the Romano family. This is what we do. This is what we did, Luca corrected. Times change. We change with them or we die. The other families can do what they want. We're charting a new course, Luca turned to face them. I'm not asking for opinions. I'm telling you how it's going to be. Anyone who doesn't like it can leave. No hard feelings. No one moved, but Luca could see the doubt in their eyes. The resistance. Change never came easy, especially not in a world built on tradition and blood. But as he dismissed them and returned to his window, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars, Luca felt something he hadn't experienced in years.
Hope.
Rachel Miller had given him back his wallet. But somehow, without meaning to, she'd given him something far more valuable, the possibility of redemption. Rachel was stacking chairs on tables, the cafe finally quiet after another long day, when the bell chimed. She turned, ready to say they were closed, and froze. Mark Miller stood in the doorway. Her ex-husband looked worse than she remembered, thinner, unshaven, with that familiar glint of desperation in his eyes that had always preceded their worst fights. We're closed, Rachel said flatly. That's how you greet your husband? Ex-husband. 3 years ex. Mark stepped inside, letting the door swing shut behind him. Still bitter, I see. What do you want, Mark? I want to see my son. Rachel's grip tightened on the chair she was holding. You haven't called in 2 years. You missed his last 3 birthdays. You don't get to just show up and… He's my son, too. Mark moved closer, and Rachel caught the smell of cheap whiskey. I have rights. Rights you signed away when you left us with nothing but debt and a broken promise. I was grieving. My brother had just died, and you just expected me to keep pretending everything was fine. I expected you to be a father. Rachel's voice rose despite herself. Danny was 5 years old, Mark. He needed you, and you chose the bottle instead. Mark's face darkened. Yeah, well, maybe I've changed. Maybe I'm ready to step up now. Now? Now that he's 8 and doesn't even remember what you look like. Rachel set down the chair, crossing her arms. Where is this coming from? I've been thinking. A boy needs his father. And honestly, Rachel, look at this place, he gestured around the cafe with contempt. You're barely keeping it together. Working yourself to death. Danny deserves better. Better than a mother who loves him? Who's there every single day? Better than poverty. Mark leaned against the counter, a cruel smile playing at his lips. I'm getting remarried. Sarah, she's got money, a real house in the suburbs. We can give Danny stability, a proper education, things you can't afford. Rachel's blood ran cold. You're not taking my son. I'm not asking permission. I talked to a lawyer. Given your financial situation, the court might agree that Danny would be better off with me and Sarah. You're broke, Mark. You've been broke since your brother died. What lawyer? Sarah's lawyer. And she's not broke, Mark straightened, Enjoying this now. We're filing for custody next week. Thought I'd give you a heads up. Professional courtesy. Get out. You can't keep him from me, Rachel. I'm his father. You're a drunk who abandoned his family. Rachel's voice shook with rage. You think any judge will give you custody after you disappeared for 2 years? I think any judge will see a struggling single mother who can barely make rent working in a failing cafe in a bad neighborhood. They'll see a father who's turned his life around, got sober, got married to a woman with resources. Mark headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Rachel? Danny told Sarah he wished he had a dad who came to his baseball games.
Might want to work on that.
The door chimed as he left, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. Rachel stood frozen, her mind reeling. Mark was full of threats, he always had been. But he'd never mentioned lawyers before. Never mentioned custody. And the way he'd said Sarah's name, with that smug certainty. Her phone buzzed. Mrs. Patterson from next door. Danny's asking about dinner. You okay? Rachel's hands shook as she typed back. Be there in 10 minutes. Thank you. She finished closing up in a daze, her mind spinning through scenarios. Could Mark really take Danny? Would a court actually consider it? She'd been late on rent twice this year. The cafe was drowning in debt. Her savings account had exactly $200. What if Mark was right? What if she wasn't enough? By the time she picked up Danny and got him fed and tucked into bed, Rachel felt like she'd aged 10 years. She sat at their tiny kitchen table, staring at her laptop, Googling family law attorneys she couldn't afford.
Consultation fee, $3 cents moins 5 cents.
Retainer, $2,500 to $5,000. Average custody case, $15,000 to $30,000. She closed the laptop before she started crying. Outside, in a black sedan parked 3 cars down, Vincent lowered his binoculars and dialed his phone. Boss, we got a situation. Talk to me. The ex-husband showed up at the cafe. Confrontation lasted about 10 minutes. She looked shaken when he left. I ran his plates. Mark Andrew Miller got a warrant for unpaid child support in New Jersey, 2 DUIs, currently living in Queens with a woman named Sarah Brennan. And he was in her face, boss. Aggressive body language. I couldn't hear what was said, but she looked rattled after. Silence on the other end. Then, keep watching. I want to know if he comes back. You want me to have a conversation with him? The quiet kind.
No.
Not yet. Another pause. But find out everything about him. Everything. And the woman he's living with. On it, boss. Vincent hung up and settled back in his seat, watching the lights in Rachel's apartment above the cafe. One window glowed warm, probably the kids' room. The other stayed dark for a long time before finally flickering on. Through the curtains, Vincent could see Rachel's silhouette, pacing. Even from this distance, her distress was evident. In his penthouse across the city, Luca stood at his window, phone still in his hand. He'd told Vincent no intervention. He'd promised himself he wouldn't insert himself into Rachel's life beyond keeping a distant watch. But the thought of someone threatening her son, made something dark and familiar rise in his chest. The old instincts, the protective fury that had made him dangerous in the first place. He pulled up a contact on his phone. Mitchell Grayson, attorney at law. Specializes in family court. The best custody lawyer in New York. Owed Lucas several significant favors from a case involving a senator's son and some very unfortunate photographs. Luca's thumb hovered over the call button. She doesn't want your help, a voice in his head warned. She doesn't even know you. This isn't your problem. But another voice, quieter but stronger, whispered back. She gave you back your wallet when she needed the money. She refused your reward when it would have solved her problems. She's drowning, and she won't ask for a life preserver because she's too proud. Luca pressed call. Mitchell. It's Luca Romano. I need a favor. A big 1 inch. Rachel hadn't slept. She'd spent the entire night switching between crying and researching and crying. Every article about custody battles made her stomach sink lower. Every lawyer's website reminded her how far out of her league she was. At 5 a.m., she gave up and made coffee, watching the sunrise through her kitchen window. Danny would wake up in 2 hours, expecting breakfast and normalcy. She'd give him both, even if she had to fake it. The summons arrived at 9 a.m., hand-delivered by a courier. Rachel's hands shook as she read the legal jargon, petition for modification of custody. The hearing was scheduled for Friday, 3 days away. 3 days to find a lawyer she couldn't afford. 3 days to prepare a defense she didn't know how to build. 3 days before Mark could potentially rip her world apart. She called 6 law offices that morning. 5 said their retainers started at $5,000. The 6th offered a payment plan that would take her 10 years to pay off, assuming she won. By Thursday afternoon, Rachel had resigned herself to representing herself in court. She printed out templates, read every article she could find, and prepared a statement that sounded desperate even to her own ears. Friday morning arrived like an execution date. Rachel dropped Danny at school, hugging him longer than usual. He squirmed away, embarrassed, having no idea that his entire future hung in the balance. She watched him run toward his friends, his backpack bouncing, and felt her heart splinter.
Please, God.
Please let me keep him. The courthouse was a maze of marble and bureaucracy. Rachel found the right courtroom, her stomach churning, and pushed through the doors. Mark sat on the other side with a blonde woman who must be Sarah, polished, confident, wearing a suit that probably cost more than Rachel's monthly rent. Next to them sat a lawyer in an even more expensive suit, reviewing documents with the air of someone who'd never lost a case. Rachel took her seat alone, clutching her folder of printed articles and handwritten notes. Then the doors opened behind her. A man in an immaculate charcoal suit walked in, carrying a leather briefcase that screamed sophistication. He was in his 50s, with silver hair and the kind of presence that made people instinctively defer to him. He walked straight to Rachel's table and extended his hand. "Ms. Miller? Mitchell Grayson. I'll be representing you today." Rachel stared at him. "I'm sorry, what?" "Your legal representation." He sat down, opening his briefcase with practiced efficiency. "Now, we don't have much time before the judge arrives, so let me brief you quickly on our strategy. I didn't hire you. I can't afford. Your representation has been arranged anonymously. Pro bono work through a legal fund." Mitchell's smile was reassuring but professional. "Trust me, Ms. Miller, you're in good hands." Rachel's mind raced. Legal fund? Nothing about this made sense, but across the room, Mark's lawyer had noticed Mitchell and his expression had shifted from confident to concerned. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Patricia Monroe presiding. The hearing began, and Rachel quickly realized she was watching a master at work. Mark's lawyer opened with their argument. Rachel's financial instability, her long work hours, the struggling cafe in a questionable neighborhood. He painted a picture of Danny living in poverty while Mark and Sarah could offer private schools, a big house, summer camps. Then Mitchell Grayson stood. "Your Honor," opposing counsel paints an interesting picture. "Let's examine it more closely." He pulled out a document. "Mark Miller has 3 outstanding warrants for unpaid child support in New Jersey, totaling $18,000. He hasn't contributed a single dollar to his son's welfare in 3 years. Mark's lawyer jumped up. "Your Honor, my client was dealing with grief that included 2 DUI arrests." Mitchell continued smoothly, one of which occurred while his son was still an infant. He turned to Mark. "Mr. Miller, where were you on Danny's 6th birthday?" I don't. Let me help. According to these phone records, you were in Atlantic City, at a casino, where you lost $7,000. Mitchell placed the records in front of the judge. "His 7th birthday?
Miami.
8th birthday? You sent a text message. Would you like me to read it to the court?" Mark's face had gone pale. Sarah's hand clutched his arm, her confident smile cracking. "Now, regarding Ms. Miller," Mitchell's voice softened. "She works 60 hours a week to keep her small business afloat. She's never missed a parent-teacher conference. Never missed a doctor's appointment. Her son is an A student who describes his mother as the best person in the world. That's from his school essay, which I've submitted as evidence. He turned to face Mark and Sarah directly. Miss Brennan, you're engaged to Mr. Miller, correct? Sarah nodded stiffly. Have you met Danny?
Once.
Briefly. Once. And, Mr. Miller, how many of Danny's baseball games have you attended? I've been busy. 0. The answer is 0. Mitchell turned back to the judge. Your Honor, this isn't about providing a better life. This is about a father who abandoned his son, attempting to assuage his guilt by disrupting a stable, loving home. The judge reviewed the documents, her expression unreadable. Finally, she looked at Mark. Mr. Miller, these are serious allegations. The unpaid child support alone is concerning. Your Honor, I can explain. I'm sure you can. But not today. She closed the folder. Petition denied. Primary custody remains with Ms. Rachel Miller. Mr. Miller, you may petition for supervised visitation once you've addressed these outstanding warrants and completed a substance abuse evaluation. The gavel fell. Rachel sat frozen, unable to process what had just happened. Mark stormed out, Sarah trailing behind him. His lawyer gathered his papers with barely concealed irritation. Mitchell Grayson turned to her with a warm smile. Congratulations, Ms. Miller. I don't understand.
Who paid for this?
Who? Rachel's eyes widened.
Luca Romano.
Mitchell's expression remained perfectly neutral. As I said, anonymous donor. Legal fund. Mr. Grayson, please. I need to know. What you need to know, Mitchell said gently, packing his briefcase, is that you won. Your son is safe. Someone believes you deserved a fair fight. Does the rest really matter? He handed her his card. If Mr. Miller causes any more trouble, call me directly. Then he was gone, leaving Rachel alone in the emptying courtroom, her hands shaking with relief and confusion, and something that felt dangerously close to gratitude for a man she barely knew. Rachel stood outside Romano Tower for the second time in 2 weeks, but this visit felt completely different. Last time, she'd been returning something. This time, she was demanding answers. The same security guard from before recognized her immediately. Ms. Miller. Should I announce you? Tell him Rachel Miller is here, and she's not leaving until she talks to him. 5 minutes later, she was in the elevator, rising toward the 30th floor with her heart pounding. Anger and gratitude warred inside her chest, neither one winning. Luca was standing at his window when she entered, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city like he owned it, which she was beginning to suspect he partially did. Ms. Miller, he turned, unsurprised. I was wondering when you'd come. It was you. The lawyer. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't. Rachel's voice was sharp. Don't lie to me. Mitchell Grayson doesn't take pro bono cases. He's one of the most expensive attorneys in New York. And somehow he shows up to represent a broke cafe owner he's never met. Luca studied her for a moment, then gestured to a chair.
See.
I'll stand. Rachel. How did you know? About Mark, about the custody hearing? Her voice rose. Have you been watching me? The silence that followed was answer enough. Oh my God, Rachel's anger crystallized into something colder. You've been spying on me. Since I returned your wallet, you've had people watching me. Protecting you. I didn't ask for protection. I didn't ask for any of this. She stepped closer. Do you have any idea how violated I feel right now? How wrong this is? You were in trouble, so you decided to play God? Swoop in and fix my problems without asking? Rachel's hands clenched. I'm not some damsel in distress who needs rescuing, Mr. Romano. I'm a grown woman who can fight her own battles. Could you have afforded Mitchell Grayson? The question hung in the air, brutal in its honesty. That's not the point, Rachel said quietly. That's exactly the point. Your ex-husband was going to take your son because he had money and resources, and you had nothing but love. Tell me that's justice. It's life. And life isn't fair, but that doesn't give you the right to... She stopped, fighting back frustrated tears.
Why?
Why do you even care? Luca was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd ever heard it. Because you gave me back my wallet when you needed that money. Because you refused a reward that would have solved your problems. Because in 15 years of living in a world where everyone takes, you were the first person who gave. So this is what? Repayment.
No.
This is me trying to remember what it's like to do the right thing. He moved closer, and Rachel fought the urge to step back. You said people do good things every day. That I just need to look for them. Well, I looked. And I found you drowning, and I threw you a life preserver. I'm not sorry for that. Rachel closed her eyes, exhausted. You can't just fix people's lives without permission. I know. And I'm sorry for the surveillance.
I'll stop, he paused.
But I'm not sorry you kept your son. Despite everything, Rachel felt tears slip down her cheeks. The relief of winning, the violation of being watched, the confusion of owing a debt to a man she didn't understand. It all crashed over her at once. I don't know if I should thank you or slap you, she admitted. Both seem reasonable. A surprised laugh escaped her. She wiped her eyes, suddenly aware of how she must look, running on no sleep, wearing her cafe uniform, crying in a penthouse office. There's something else, Luca said. He returned to his desk, pulling out a folder. You're good with numbers. I've seen how you manage your cafe, the inventory tracking, the budget management. You're keeping a failing business afloat through pure financial efficiency. Where is this going? I need someone honest to handle my accounts. My books, he set the folder in front of her. Someone who isn't afraid to tell me when something doesn't add up. Rachel opened it, scanning the numbers. Her eyes widened. This is a lot of money. Romano Holdings has diverse interests. Construction, shipping, real estate development. He watched her reaction carefully. Some of those interests exist in legal gray areas. I'm trying to change that, but I need someone I can trust to help me sort through it. You barely know me. I know you returned $10,000 when you were behind on your rent. I know you refused a $2,000 tip. I know you fought for your son, even when you thought you'd lose. Luca leaned against his desk. Trust has to start somewhere. Rachel stared at the numbers, her mind racing. The salary listed would change her life. Pay off the cafe's debts, give Danny everything he needed, let her breathe for the first time in 3 years. But she'd heard the rumors about Luca Romano. Seen the way people moved out of his way, the respect that looked more like fear. She wasn't naive enough to think all his money came from construction and real estate. I can't be part of anything illegal, she said firmly. That's exactly why I'm asking you. I want to move away from the illegal operations. Transition everything to legitimate business. But I need someone who'll actually hold me accountable. And if I find something wrong in these books, something criminal, then you tell me and we fix it. Rachel looked at him, searching for deception. But his eyes were steady, almost hopeful. One condition, she said finally. I do this clean. No lies, no blood, no looking the other way. The moment I think you're pulling me into something wrong, I walk.
No arguments, no consequences.
Agreed.
And no more surveillance.
No more secret lawyers. If I need help, I'll ask. Agreed. She took a deep breath. Then I guess I'm working for you. For the first time since she'd met him, Luca Romano smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look years younger. Welcome to Romano Holdings, Ms. Miller. Rachel shook his extended hand, ignoring the voice in her head screaming that she was making a deal with the devil. But maybe, just maybe, even devils could be redeemed. 3 weeks into her new position, Rachel sat in her office at Romano Holdings, an actual office with windows and a door that closed, surrounded by financial records that made her head spin.
And her stomach turn.
She'd started with the real estate division, expecting complicated but legal transactions. What she found instead was a labyrinth of shell companies, cash payments with no paper trail, and properties acquired through methods that made her profoundly uncomfortable. Rachel pulled up another file. A construction contract with the city, won through a bid that had somehow eliminated all other competitors. She cross-referenced the dates with campaign donations and felt her suspicions solidify into certainty. Find something interesting? She jumped. Luca stood in her doorway, 2 coffee cups in hand. He'd started bringing her coffee every morning, always black, the way she made it at her cafe, and somehow it had become their ritual. Define interesting, Rachel said, accepting the cup. Luca closed the door and sat across from her. In the past 3 weeks, they'd developed an easy working relationship. He listened when she talked, never dismissed her concerns, and seemed genuinely interested in her insights. It would have been pleasant if not for the growing pile of questionable transactions she kept uncovering. The Henderson property, Rachel said, turning her laptop toward him. We acquired it for 30% below market value. The previous owner declared bankruptcy 2 weeks after selling. And his business collapsed after 3 of his major clients suddenly terminated their contracts. All on the same day, she pulled up another document. Those clients? They're all connected to Romano Holdings through various subsidiaries. Luca's expression didn't change. That's how business works sometimes. That's extortion, Luca. The use of his first name had become natural, though it still felt intimate in a way that made her slightly uncomfortable. He noticed his eyes flickered with something she couldn't quite read. The man was sitting on prime waterfront property and refusing to sell, Luca said calmly. We needed that land for the harbor development project. So you destroyed his livelihood. So we encouraged a business decision. Rachel closed her laptop with more force than necessary. This is exactly what I was afraid of. You said you wanted to go legitimate, but these records show business practices that have been standard for decades, Luca interrupted. You think the other corporations in this city got where they are by playing nice? This is how the game works. Then change the game. Rachel stood, frustrated. You have enough money and power to do business honestly. Why don't you? Because honest businesses fail. They get crushed by competitors who don't play by the rules. Or they succeed because people respect integrity. She moved to the window, looking out at the city. I've been going through your books for 3 weeks now. Do you know what I found? You have legitimate operations, making incredible profits. The construction division alone is generating millions. Your shipping contracts are solid. The real estate developments are brilliant. She turned back to him. You don't need the shady stuff, Luca. You're already successful. The illegal operations are just legacy, habit. You're holding on to them because it's what you know, not because you need them. Luca was quiet, his coffee forgotten on the desk. I found something else, Rachel continued, her voice softer now. 3 months ago, you anonymously paid off the mortgage for an elderly couple facing foreclosure. 2 months ago, you funded a community center in Queens. Last month, you hired 20 ex-cons for your construction crew when no one else would give them a chance. How did you? Because I'm good at my job. And because you try to hide it, which tells me you knew those were the right things to do, Rachel sat back down. You're not the Ruthless Mafia boss everyone thinks you are. Not anymore. Maybe you were once, but that man wouldn't have helped Tony Castellano with his sister's medical bills. That man wouldn't have saved my son. Luca's jaw tightened. You don't know what I've done. The things I'm responsible for. You're right. I don't. But I know who you're trying to become. She pulled up a new document on her laptop. I've spent the last week creating a plan. A real plan for transitioning Romano Holdings into a completely legitimate operation. She turned the screen toward him. It'll take 18 months. We close the shell companies, dissolve the questionable partnerships, and restructure everything under transparent corporate governance. Yes, you'll lose some revenue initially, but long-term, you'll be untouchable. Legal, successful, and actually able to sleep at night. Luca stared at the spreadsheet, years of projections and detailed steps for dismantling an empire built on shadows. This would mean walking away from relationships that go back decades, he said quietly. Burning bridges with powerful people. Good riddances to bridges that lead nowhere good. A smile tugged at his lips. You make it sound simple. It's not simple. It's hard. Maybe the hardest thing you'll ever do. Rachel met his eyes. But you hired me to tell you the truth. Here's the truth. You can either be a reformed criminal trying to go straight, or you can be a legitimate businessman who made tough choices to correct past mistakes. The first one always has a target on his back. The second one builds something that lasts. Luca stood, moving to the window beside her. For a long moment, they stood in silence, watching the city spread out below them. My father used to say that men like us don't get redemption, Luca said finally. We just get older and meaner until someone puts a bullet in us. Your father was wrong. He usually was. Luca turned to her, and Rachel saw something vulnerable in his expression. If we do this, if we really commit to this plan, I'm going to lose people. Friends, associates, maybe even some family. But you'll keep yourself, Rachel said. Your integrity, your future. And you? If this blows up, you'll be caught in the crossfire. Then we better make sure it doesn't blow up. Luca laughed, a real, surprised laugh that transformed his entire face. How did you get so fearless? I'm not fearless.
I'm terrified.
But I raised a child alone for 3 years. Compared to that, restructuring a corporate empire seems almost manageable. He extended his hand. Partners? Rachel shook it, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. Partners. But I'm serious about the clean part, Luca. No more shortcuts. No more gray areas. No more gray areas, he agreed. As she returned to her desk, pulling up the restructuring plan, Rachel didn't see the way Luca watched her, with something that looked dangerously close to admiration. Or hope. Or something neither of them was quite ready to name. The call came at 2 a.m. Luca answered on the first ring, already knowing it meant trouble. Good news never arrived in the middle of the night. Boss, we got a problem. Vincent's voice was tight. The Moretti family just intercepted our shipment at the docks. Luca was out of bed instantly, pulling on clothes. What shipment? The construction materials for the harbor project. 20 tons of steel beams, cement equipment. They hit the convoy, send our drivers to the hospital. Nothing fatal, but they're sending a message. What message? They left a note. I'm texting you a photo now. Luca's phone buzzed. The message was scrawled on the side of one of his trucks in red spray paint. Get rid of the woman or lose everything. His blood turned to ice. Where's Rachel?
Home.
We've got eyes on her building. She's safe. Double the security. I want someone on her floor, someone in the parking lot, and someone watching the cafe.
Now.
Already done. Boss, the Morettis are serious. They're saying your cleaning lady is destroying the revenue streams. The loan operations you shut down, the gambling dens you closed, the protection rackets you dissolved. That was all shared territory. They're losing money because you're going legit. Luca grabbed his keys. I'm coming to the docks. There's more. It's not just the Morettis. I'm hearing rumbles from the Castellano family, the Russos, even some of our own people. They think you've gone soft. They're saying the cafe woman has you whipped. Let them say what they want. Luca, Vincent rarely used his first name. They're talking about moving against you. A vote of no confidence. They want to replace you with someone who'll run things the old way. Then they can try. 20 minutes later, Luca stood at the docks, surveying the damage. His trucks were stripped, materials scattered across the concrete like a child's discarded toys. The message was clear. Step back in line or face war. Marco approached, his expression dark. This is what happens when you try to play nice. The Morettis see weakness. They attack. That's the only language these people understand. What would you have me do, Marco? What you should have done weeks ago. Hit them back.
Hard.
Remind everyone in this city why people fear the Romano name. And Rachel? Marco's silence was telling. Say it, Luca demanded. She's a liability. She's costing you money, respect, and now she's painting a target on your back. You want my honest opinion? Pay her off, send her away, and get back to business.
No.
Boss. I said no. Luca's voice dropped to something dangerous. Rachel Miller is under my protection. Anyone who touches her answers to me. Make sure that message reaches the Morettas, the Castellanos, and anyone else who's forgotten who they're dealing with. You're choosing her over the family? I'm choosing the future over the past. Luca turned to face his assembled men, capos, enforcers, soldiers who'd followed him for years. I'm done with the old ways. We're going legitimate, and anyone who doesn't like it can walk right now. No hard feelings. No one moved, but Luca could feel the resistance, the doubt radiating from them. The Morettas think I've gone soft, Luca continued. They think because I'm not burning down buildings and breaking legs anymore, I've lost my edge. Let me be clear. I'm offering peace, not surrender. There's a difference. And if they don't accept peace? Vincent asked. Then we remind them why peace was a good idea. The meeting with the Morettas was arranged for the following night at a neutral location, an old restaurant that had served as a meeting ground for the 5 families for decades. Luca arrived with Vincent and Marco, leaving his other men outside as tradition demanded. Don Moretti sat at the head of the table, a man in his 60s with cold eyes and colder hands. His 2 sons flanked him, both eager for violence. Luca Romano, the Don said. You've caused quite a disruption. I've restructured my business operations. That's my right. Your restructuring is costing the rest of us millions. The loan operations brought steady income. The gambling and protection, those were shared territories. You don't get to just walk away. I just did. The younger son, Tony Moretti, slammed his hand on the table. You're destroying the infrastructure our fathers built. And for what? Some woman. Careful, Luca said softly. Everyone knows she's got you wrapped around her finger. The great Luca Romano, brought to his knees by a cafe owner, Tony leaned forward. Get rid of her, go back to business as usual, and we forget the disrespect. Or we remove the problem ourselves. The threat hung in the air like gun smoke. Luca stood slowly, his chair scraping against the floor. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of every violent year that had built his reputation. Let me make this perfectly clear. Rachel Miller is off limits. Her son is off limits. Her cafe is off limits. Anyone who touches her, looks at her wrong, or even drives past her building with ill intent will answer to me personally. He placed both hands on the table, leaning toward the Morettas. And I promise you, the man you knew, the one who built this empire on fear and blood, he's not gone. He's just trying to be better. But if you force my hand, I will burn every bridge in the city. I will dismantle your operations piece by piece. I will make you wish you'd accepted my peace. Don Moretti's eyes narrowed. You threaten the 5 families over one woman.
No.
I'm drawing a line in the sand over principle. The old ways are dying. I'm offering a path forward. But if you want war instead, Luca straightened. I've never lost a war. There's always a first time. Then I guess we'll find out. Luca headed for the door, then paused. You have 48 hours to decide. Peace or war. Choose wisely. As they left the restaurant, Marco muttered, You just declared war on the 5 families.
No, Luca corrected.
I offered peace. They're the ones choosing war. Vincent pulled up the car. What now? Luca checked his phone. A text from his security team. R. Miller safe. No movement near her location. Now we prepare. If they want the old Luca Romano, they're about to remember why that's a bad idea. Rachel locked the cafe's front door, exhaustion settling into her bones. It had been a brutal day. The espresso machine had broken, she'd burned a batch of muffins, and 3 regulars had complained about the price increase she'd been forced to implement. Danny was at a sleepover, which meant she could actually go home and collapse without having to pretend everything was fine. She didn't notice the black sedan parked across the street. Didn't see the 2 men watching her from the shadows. The parking lot behind the cafe was poorly lit, something she'd been meaning to fix but couldn't afford. Rachel fumbled with her keys, her mind already on the hot bath waiting at home. Rachel Miller? She spun around. 2 men in dark clothing, faces obscured by masks, stood between her and her car. Every instinct screamed danger. Who are you? She backed toward the cafe door, hand searching for her keys. Someone wants you to disappear. The taller one pulled out a gun. Rachel's world narrowed to that single point of metal glinting in the streetlight. She'd never seen a real gun pointed at her before. It was smaller than she'd imagined. More terrifying. Please, she heard herself say. I have a son. Should have thought of that before you started messing with things that don't concern you. The shorter man moved forward. Rachel threw her purse at him, a desperate, useless gesture, and tried to run. She made it 3 steps before he grabbed her arm, yanking her back with brutal force. Then, everything exploded into chaos. A car engine roared. Tires squealed. Suddenly, there were more men, 4 of them, appearing from nowhere. Vincent, she recognized him from Romano Holdings. The others were Luca's security team. Get down, Vincent shouted at her. Rachel dropped to the ground as fists started flying. The masked man holding her released his grip to face the new threat. She crawled toward her cafe door, her hands shaking so badly she couldn't get the key in the lock. A gunshot cracked through the air. Rachel screamed, covering her head. More shouting, the sound of bodies hitting concrete, someone cursing in Italian. Strong hands grabbed her. She fought instinctively, until Vincent's voice cut through her panic. Ms. Miller, it's me. We need to get you inside.
Now.
He half-dragged, half-carried her into the cafe, slamming the door behind them. Through the window, Rachel watched the fight continue. The 2 masked attackers were outnumbered, but desperate. One of Luca's men went down, blood blooming on his shoulder. The fallen attacker's gun lay on the concrete, just a few feet away. Rachel didn't think. She shoved past Vincent, threw open the door, and ran. Her fingers closed around cold metal just as one of the masked men lunged at Vincent from behind. Vincent. She raised the gun with both hands, the way she'd seen in movies, and fired straight up into the air. The explosion was deafening. The recoil nearly knocked her over. But everyone froze. Attackers, defenders, everyone staring at the terrified woman holding a gun she barely knew how to use. Sirens wailed in the distance. Someone must have called the police. The masked men ran, disappearing into the darkness like smoke. Luca's security team didn't pursue. They were too busy securing the perimeter, checking injuries, and staring at Rachel like she'd grown a second head. Vincent gently took the gun from her trembling hands. Ms. Miller, you shouldn't have. They were going to hurt you. Her voice sounded strange, distant. I couldn't let them. Her legs gave out. Vincent caught her before she hit the ground, guiding her to sit on the cafe's steps. The adrenaline was draining away, leaving her hollow and shaking. Red and blue lights flooded the parking lot. Police cars, an ambulance. Rachel answered questions in a daze, her voice mechanical. Yes, she owned the cafe. No, she didn't know the attackers. Yes, she'd fired the gun. No, she didn't have a permit. The weapon was discharged in self-defense, Vincent told the officers smoothly. Multiple witnesses. We'll provide full statements. Then another car arrived, driving too fast, stopping with a screech of brakes. Luca emerged like a storm, his face a mask of controlled fury. He scanned the scene, his injured man being loaded into an ambulance, the police securing the area, and finally, Rachel sitting on the steps wrapped in a shock blanket. Their eyes met across the parking lot. He was beside her in 3 long strides, kneeling down to her level. Are you hurt? Rachel shook her head, unable to speak. Did they touch you? Vincent stopped them. Your men, they saved my life. Luca's jaw clenched. He turned to Vincent. Report. 2 attackers, both masked. Professional job. They were waiting for her. We intercepted before they could extract her. Moretti? Most likely. Luca stood, and Rachel saw something frightening in his expression. The Ruthless Mafia boss everyone whispered about, the man who'd built an empire on fear. This wasn't the person who brought her coffee every morning. This was someone capable of terrible things. Luca, she said, and he immediately softened, turning back to her. I'm taking you somewhere safe. I need to go home. Danny's at a sleepover, I have to. Vincent's already checking on him. He's safe, I promise. Luca helped her to her feet. But you can't stay here. Not tonight. This is your fault. The words came out sharper than Rachel intended, but she was too shaken to care. You brought this to my door. Those men came here because of you, because of whatever war you're fighting. The police officers and Luca's men suddenly found other things to look at. You're right, Luca said quietly. This is my fault. And I'm sorry. But right now, I need you to trust me long enough to get you somewhere they can't find you. Rachel looked at him, this dangerous, complicated man who'd somehow become part of her life. She should refuse. Should tell him to stay away from her and Danny forever. But the truth was, she'd never been more terrified. And despite everything, despite the violence and the secrets and the world she didn't understand, she knew Luca Romano would die before he let anyone hurt her. Okay, she whispered. But tomorrow we talk. About all of this. Tomorrow, Luca agreed. I'll tell you everything. As he guided her to his car, his hand protective on her back, Rachel glanced at the cafe she'd worked so hard to build. Blood stained the concrete. Police tape cordoned off the area. Her quiet, ordinary life had just been shattered. And somewhere in the city, people were deciding whether she lived or died. Rachel didn't sleep. She'd spent the night in one of Luca's safe houses, a sleek apartment in a building with more security than a bank, staring at the ceiling and replaying the moment a gun was pointed at her face. At 6 a.m., she'd had enough. She got dressed in the clothes Vincent had brought from her apartment, checked her phone for the 100th time to confirm Danny was safe, and walked into the living room where Luca sat nursing a cup of coffee, looking like he hadn't slept either. I want answers, Rachel said. All of them. No more half-truths or corporate euphemisms. Who were those men? And why did they try to kill me? Lucas set down his cup. The Moretti family. One of the 5 families that control organized crime in New York. They see your influence on me as a threat to their operations. My influence. You've been cleaning out the black money pipeline. Every shell company you close, every questionable deal you flag, every restructuring plan you implement, it costs them money. The families shared territories with us. When I started going legitimate, their revenue streams dried up. Rachel sank onto the couch. So, they decided to kill me. They decided to send a message. Remove the problem, and I'd fall back in line. And if they'd succeeded? If your men hadn't been there? Luca's expression darkened. Then I would have burned the city to the ground until I found everyone responsible. The certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it made something warm unfurl in her chest, a feeling she absolutely didn't want to examine. This has to stop, Rachel said. All of it. I can't live like this, Luca. I can't have Danny growing up watching his mother get escorted by armed guards. I can't jump at every shadow wondering if someone's going to. I know. So, what are you going to do? Go to war with these families? More violence, more blood? She stood, anger replacing fear. Is that your solution? What would you have me do? Luca rose to meet her. Walk away? Let them win? They try to kill you, Rachel. They put a gun in your face. Because you dragged me into your world. I was fine before, struggling, yes, but safe. And now, her voice broke. Now my son could lose his mother, because I tried to help you become a better person. The words hit Luca like a physical blow. He turned away, running a hand through his hair, and Rachel saw his shoulders tighten with the weight of it. You're right, he said quietly. I should have left you alone. Should have let you refuse that reward, and never looked back. But I was selfish. I saw something good, something real, and I wanted to be near it, even knowing what it might cost you.
So, what now?
You pay me off like Marco suggested and send me away. Luca spun around. Is that what you want? Rachel opened her mouth to say yes, to tell him she wanted her old life back, her safety, her anonymity. But the words wouldn't come, because the truth was more complicated than that. In the past month, she'd felt more alive than she had in years. Working at Romano Holdings had challenged her in ways the cafe never could. Watching Luca change, seeing him choose mercy over violence, integrity over profit, it had made her believe that people could transform, that redemption was possible. And God help her, she'd started to care about him. Not just the reformed version he was trying to become, but all of him. The darkness and the light, the violence and the gentleness, the monster and the man. "I want you to stop this," she said finally. "Not by running away or paying people off. By actually committing to the change. No more halfway measures. No more foot in both worlds. Rachel, I've been going through your books for a month. I see the progress, but I also see you hedging your bets. Keeping connections to the old operations, maintaining relationships with people who want you to fail at going legitimate." She stepped closer. "If you walk away, if you really commit to building something clean, then everything you built crumbles. You said that yourself. Thousands of people lose their jobs. Then, what's the alternative? Build something better." Rachel's voice was fierce now. "You have the resources, the intelligence, the power. Use it to create legitimate businesses that actually help people. Employ ex-cons who need second chances. Invest in neighborhoods everyone else abandoned. Prove that you can be successful without the violence and crime. The families won't accept that. Then let them reject it. You don't need their acceptance. You need your own integrity." She grabbed his arm, forcing him to look at her. "The man who saved Tony Castellano's sister, who funded a community center, who gave me back my son, that's who you really are. But you keep one foot in the old world because you're afraid. Afraid that if you let go completely, you'll have nothing. What if I let go and they destroy everything? What if they come after you again? Or Danny, or... Then we fight them legally. We build something so solid, so legitimate, that they can't touch it without exposing themselves." Rachel's eyes blazed. "You told me once that your father said men, like you, don't get redemption. Prove him wrong. Be the man who walked away from the empire and built something that actually mattered." Lucas stared at her, something shifting behind his eyes. "If I do this, if I really burn it all down, I lose everything. Friends, family, the respect I spent 15 years building. But you keep yourself, your soul, your future." She softened her voice. "And maybe, just maybe, you get to be the kind of man who sleeps at night." The silence stretched between them, heavy with possibility and risk. Finally, Luca pulled out his phone. "Get me Marco, Vincent, and all the capos. Conference room. 1 hour." "What are you going to do?" "Something I should have done the moment you walked into my office." He met her eyes. "I'm going to choose a side." An hour later, Rachel watched through the glass wall as Luca faced his assembled lieutenants. She couldn't hear the words, but she could see the reactions: shock, anger, disbelief. Marco stood and shouted something. 2 other capos walked out. But Luca didn't waver. He stood straight, resolute, as he dismantled everything his father had built. When he emerged 30 minutes later, he looked exhausted but lighter somehow. Unburdened. "It's done," he said. "Romano Holdings goes clean." Anyone who disagreed, he gestured to the half-empty conference room. "They're gone. And the families? Let them come. We'll be ready. But we fight them in courtrooms now, not warehouses." Rachel took his hand, squeezing it. "This is the right choice." "I hope you're right," Luca said. "Because I just bet everything on you being right." Rachel walked through Romano Tower like she owned the place, which, in a way, she partially did. The restructuring had been brutal, exhausting, and occasionally terrifying, but they'd done it. Romano Holdings was clean. She carried a stack of quarterly reports that showed exactly how clean. Construction contracts secured through legitimate bids. Shipping operations fully transparent and federally compliant. Real estate developments that actually revitalized neighborhoods instead of exploiting them. The company had taken a financial hit initially, about 30% revenue loss, when they'd cut ties with the Underworld. But they'd recovered faster than anyone expected. Turned out, legitimate businesses attracted legitimate investors. Their stock had climbed steadily. 3 major firms had approached them about partnerships. Rachel pushed open Luca's office door without knocking, another thing that had changed. They'd become partners in every sense of the word, though neither had been brave enough to define exactly what that meant. Luca stood at his window, the same spot where she'd first confronted him months ago. But everything else was different now. The harbor development project broke ground this morning, he said without turning around.
No Moretti interference. No threats.
Just honest construction. That's because the Morettis are too busy with their own legal problems. Rachel set down the reports with satisfaction. Turns out, when you're not protecting them anymore, the FBI gets very interested in their operations.
Luca smiled.
I had nothing to do with that. I know. That's what makes it beautiful. They destroyed themselves. She moved beside him at the window. How many are left now? Of the old guard. Vincent stayed. 3 others. Everyone else either walked or tried to undermine the transition. And Marco. Last I heard, he's working for the Castellanos. Probably telling them all about how I've gone soft. Luca's voice held no bitterness, only acceptance. Rachel studied his reflection in the glass. He looked different than the man she'd met 4 months ago, still powerful, still intense, but the hardness around his eyes had softened. He smiled more, laughed occasionally, looked like someone who actually slept at night. Danny asked about you yesterday, she said. Luca turned to her, interested. Yeah. He wanted to know if you were going to come to his baseball game on Saturday. Rachel watched his reaction carefully. I told him I'd ask. I'd like that. They'd been careful around Danny, Luca keeping his distance, Rachel not wanting to confuse her son about who this man was in their lives. But Danny had noticed anyway, the way kids always do. Had started asking why Mr. Romano brought his mom coffee every morning, why he made her smile in a way she hadn't smiled in years. There's something else, Rachel said. She reached into her bag and pulled out a familiar black leather wallet, the same one that had started everything. She'd kept it all these months, waiting for the right moment. She placed it on his desk. Luca picked it up, confused. My wallet? I thought I'd lost this. You gave it to me, the day you hired me. Said I should hold on to it as collateral, to make sure you kept your promises. That wasn't exactly true, but Rachel had decided months ago that sometimes the story was more important than the facts. You gave up everything to go clean. The illegal operations, the protection rackets, most of your inner circle. You rebuilt this company from the ground up. She moved closer. You kept your promise. Now, let's build something that actually matters. Luca set down the wallet, his eyes locked on hers. We already have. I mean something more. Rachel pulled up documents on her phone. I've been doing research. There are 15 abandoned properties in my neighborhood. We could buy them, renovate them, create affordable housing and small business incubators. Real urban renewal, not the kind that pushes people out. That's a massive investment. You told me once you wanted to do something that mattered. This matters. This changes lives. Luca studied the plans, and Rachel saw the exact moment he committed, his shoulders straightening, his eyes lighting up with purpose. Let's do it, he said. Full community investment. Affordable housing, job training, small business support. He looked at her. But only if you're by my side. As a full partner. I'm already your partner. I mean as an equal. Co-owner. Your name on the company charter. He stepped closer, and Rachel's breath caught. I can't do this without you. Don't want to do this without you. The office felt suddenly smaller, charged with everything they'd been carefully not saying for months.
Luca.
I'm not asking you to save me. I'm not asking you to fix me. I'm asking if you want to build something together. Something clean and good and real. He reached for her hand. Something that matters. Rachel looked at their joined hands, then up at his face. She saw the former mafia boss who'd chosen redemption. The ruthless businessman who'd learned mercy. The dangerous man who'd become gentle, at least with her. Yes, she said simply. Luca smiled, that rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face, and pulled her closer. Then let's get to work.
Now.
Now, he kissed her forehead, then her cheek, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, he kissed her properly, soft and careful and full of promise. When they finally broke apart, Rachel laughed. That's not work. That's the best part of partnership. Mixing business with pleasure. She pushed him playfully. You're impossible. And you're stuck with me. Rachel looked around the office, sunlight flooding through floor-to-ceiling windows, the city sprawling below them, documents for legitimate businesses covering every surface. They'd torn down an empire built on darkness and fear. Now they were building something in the light. There are worse fates, she admitted. Luca pulled her close again, and this time Rachel melted into him, without hesitation. Outside, the city continued its endless motion. Inside, two people who'd found each other through an act of simple honesty were proving that redemption wasn't just possible, it was beautiful. The single mother and the reformed mob boss. The woman who'd returned a wallet and the man who'd found his conscience. Together, they'd build something extraordinary. Together, they'd already begun. The end.